I could hardly draw breath. My chest felt constricted, as though heavy concrete blocks were resting directly on my lungs, while I stood pressed against the back wall of the glass executive boardroom. I watched 6 long months of my life being paraded across a glowing 80-inch presentation screen by men who could not explain the mathematical foundations of the code if their lives depended on it. There stood Hollis Thorne, my vice president of engineering, glowing with unearned pride as he gestured toward the room. He spoke with absolute confidence, claiming every line of code, every architectural innovation, and every system optimization as the collective triumph of his executive leadership. In his polished opening remarks, he made sure to compliment his favorite corporate lieutenants while omitting the single person who had actually built the entire platform from nothing. My name is Elliot Vance. I am 49 years old, and until that freezing Tuesday morning in October, I had spent 8 consecutive years working as a senior software architect at Helios Innovations. For nearly a decade, I believed the quiet, comforting lie that corporate meritocracy eventually rewards exceptional dedication. I believed that staying late, writing immaculate software, and taking on complex technical debt that nobody else wanted to touch would eventually earn me a seat at the decision-making table. At 49, I was one of the oldest senior engineers remaining on the core engineering team at Helios. That status turned out to be a double-edged sword. It made me indispensable whenever critical enterprise systems broke down at midnight, but it also made me an easy target for younger, politically aggressive managers who viewed veteran engineers as mere quiet workhorses to be exploited, sidelined, and forgotten. Growing up in a blue-collar family in Ohio, my father had taught me that genuine craftsmanship spoke for itself. He believed that if you poured your heart, intellect, and sweat into your craft, the quality of your work would naturally command respect without needing to blow your own horn. For decades, I lived by that philosophy. I focused on writing clean, modular, self-documenting code, solving architectural bottlenecks, and insulating junior colleagues from executive pressure. But over my 8 years at Helios Innovations, I slowly discovered that modern corporate technology firms rarely operate on principles of quiet craftsmanship. Instead, they often reward loud self-promotion, aggressive political maneuvering, and the shameless appropriation of underlying labor by managers who spend more time perfecting their golf swing than understanding software logic. The internal environment at Helios had deteriorated markedly over the past 3 years. What was once an engineering-first technology company had transformed into a haven for middle management climbers. The open-plan engineering floor on the 3rd level was where actual technical work occurred. It was an unglamorous space filled with exhausted software developers running on lukewarm coffee, cold pizza, and tight sprint deadlines. Meanwhile, the executive suite on the 5th floor was a completely different world. A sanctuary of plush carpets, imported leather armchairs, polished mahogany tables, and glass-walled conference rooms where career managers spent their days creating multicolor slide decks, taking credit for technical breakthroughs, and engaging in corporate jockeying. The Meridian contract was the largest enterprise opportunity our firm had ever encountered in its 12-year existence. It was a $5.8 million contract to design, build, and deploy an artificial intelligence-driven supply chain management platform capable of optimizing real-time international shipping logistics. For Meridian Logistics, an international freight powerhouse moving millions of tons of cargo daily across ocean ports, rail corridors, and air freight hubs, this software was expected to save tens of millions of dollars annually in fuel consumption, port congestion penalties, and dynamic routing inefficiencies. When the initial request for proposal arrived on our desk 7 months ago, none of the executive managers wanted to touch it. It was considered far too risky, absurdly complex, and saddled with an aggressive 6-month delivery timeline that most industry analysts considered impossible. Hollis Thorne had practically tossed the technical specification folder onto my desk during a Monday morning department meeting 7 months prior. I still remember his dismissive tone, his smirk, and the subtle condescension in his voice when he said that since I was the resident veteran wizard who liked handling messy technical math, I should see if I could make something out of the project. My colleagues, including Spencer Drake from Business Development and Gavin Sears from Solutions Engineering, exchanged knowing smirks across the conference table. Their silent glances communicated a clear message. Better for Elliot to drown in an impossible project than for any of us to risk our quarterly bonus metrics on a high-profile failure. For 6 relentless months, that supply chain system became my entire existence. I surrendered my personal life completely. I canceled a long-awaited summer vacation with my sister Laura, missed my nephew's high school graduation ceremony, and spent countless evenings eating cold takeout at my desk while the office building stood silent around me. During a brutal 2-week stretch in August, I worked through a severe case of acute bronchitis, coughing into tissues tucked inside my desk drawer while running millions of simulated logistics variables on our high-performance test servers. I designed the core platform from the foundation upward, structuring complex distributed microservices, building asynchronous data pipelines, and establishing fault-tolerant database clusters. I tackled mathematical bottlenecks in predictive freight routing that leading academic papers had declared unsolvable under real-time computing constraints. The defining breakthrough occurred at 2:17 in the morning, on a rainy Thursday in early September. After 14 straight hours of debugging, I finally cracked the dynamic nonlinear routing algorithm, the key module capable of predicting meteorological disruptions across ocean freight lanes and automatically recalculating container transit pathways. That single algorithmic breakthrough guaranteed a 41% reduction in Meridian's average shipping delays. I remember sitting alone on the darkened floor of our office building, my hands trembling with sheer exhaustion and relief as the final validation tests returned a flawless zero-error output. I called my sister Laura right then. When I explained the technical triumph to her in plain terms, she began to cry softly on the phone, telling me that after 8 long years of sacrifice, management would finally be forced to recognize my true value to the firm. However, about 2 weeks before the final client pitch to Meridian's C-suite executives, I began noticing subtle but unmistakable shifts in corporate dynamics. Hollis Thorne began scheduling daily executive alignment sessions regarding the Meridian pitch. Curiously, those calendar invites were never extended to me. Whenever I walked past the executive glass offices on the 5th floor, I would see Hollis, Spencer Drake, and Gavin Sears huddled around whiteboards covered in diagrams of my system architecture. When I approached Spencer to ask why technical reviews were occurring without the primary architect present, he gave me a vague, patronizing smile and claimed they were merely organizing high-level commercial narratives so I would not be bothered with tedious business presentations. Spencer Drake and Gavin Sears represented everything I despised about modern corporate climbing. Neither of them possessed a graduate degree in computer science or software engineering, yet both excelled in the dark art of corporate visibility. They wore custom suits, spoke fluent corporate jargon, and spent their afternoons cultivating relationships with upper management over expensive lunches at downtown bistros. Meanwhile, they treated the back-end engineering staff as mere technical utility workers whose labor could be harvested, repackaged, and presented as executive vision. Gavin Sears, in particular, had made a lucrative career out of attaching his name to senior engineers' projects right before final client delivery, using polished charm to claim authorship over complex systems he did not comprehend. During those 2 weeks, Gavin Sears began dropping by my cubicle at odd hours, asking unusually detailed questions about how my proprietary predictive algorithm handled localized edge cases, such as extreme weather disruptions in the Southeast Asian shipping corridor. Naively, I assumed they were simply doing due diligence to ensure they understood the power of the solution before standing in front of Meridian's executive board. The crushing reality struck me 36 hours before the presentation when I accessed our shared cloud drive to pull up system performance metrics for final calibration. I stumbled upon the final 42-page executive slide deck that Hollis had finalized for the client. I froze as I scrolled through the pages on my dual monitors. Page after page featured my system diagrams, my architectural flowcharts, my proprietary benchmarking metrics, and my exact mathematical formulas. Yet across all 42 pages, my name did not appear even once. The presenter speaker notes clearly delineated the division of credit. Spencer Drake was identified as the commercial visionary. Behind the initiative, Gavin Sears was credited as the chief technical architect, and Hollis Thorne was highlighted as the executive innovator who personally conceived the core predictive algorithm. In fact, in the speaker notes for slide 14, Gavin had written a note claiming he had conceived the core algorithmic structure while reviewing shipping logs during his morning commute. My 6 months of grueling sacrifice, my independent white paper research, and my late-night engineering breakthroughs had been entirely erased from corporate record. The following morning, I walked straight into Hollis Thorne's corner office, holding a printed copy of the presentation slide deck. I kept my voice measured and professional, though my heart was hammering violently against my ribs. I pointed out that my name had been completely excluded from the technical presentation of a system I had built single-handedly from scratch. Hollis did not even look up from his computer screen for the first 20 seconds. He slowly leaned back in his ergonomic leather chair, laced his fingers together, and offered a sigh of practiced corporate condescension. He told me that executive presentations were specifically tailored for high-level strategic alignment and required polished executive communicators. He stated that at 49, I was an exceptionally talented backroom engineer who simply lacked the executive presence, vocal cadence, and public polish required for board-level presentations. When I reminded him that the dynamic routing algorithm was based directly on my proprietary research paper published 2 years prior to this project, Hollis hardened his tone noticeably. He stated that everything created under the roof of Helios Innovations belonged exclusively to Helios as work made for hire. He reminded me that we were a team and that teams win together under executive stewardship. He warned me not to let personal ego ruin a historic company milestone. I walked out of his office feeling physically nauseous. 8 years of unblemished loyalty, 48-hour weekend coding sprints, and ruined personal health had yielded nothing more than being told. I lacked corporate polish while watching my intellectual property being stolen in broad daylight by middle managers who could barely write a basic script. Which brings me back to that Tuesday morning in the executive boardroom. I stood against the far wall like an invisible ghost in my standard navy blazer, watching Spencer Drake and Gavin Sears walk through my presentation slides. At the center of the mahogany conference table sat Valerie Takahashi, the formidable chief executive officer of Meridian Logistics, flanked by her chief technology officer Dominic Rhodes and their legal counsel. For 30 minutes, Gavin Sears stumbled through the high-level summary, using generic corporate buzzwords to gloss over technical execution details. Valerie Takahashi listened in total silence, her sharp hazel eyes tracking every slide with analytical precision. Then came the critical moment in the meeting. Valerie Takahashi leaned forward, resting her elbows on the mahogany table, and pointed directly to slide 28. The core slide showcasing the dynamic routing engine. She observed that the projected 41% delay reduction was extraordinary, but she wanted a precise explanation of how the mathematical model accounted for sudden meteorological anomalies in the Southeast Asian shipping corridor, specifically regarding tropical storm convergence data and real-time container rerouting protocols. Gavin Sears froze like a deer in headlights. He looked nervously at Spencer Drake, who cleared his throat and offered a rambling, meaningless explanation about using a modified predictive framework. Hollis Thorne jumped in quickly, attempting to cover for them with vague corporate platitudes about cloud synergy and machine learning automation. The answers were blatantly incorrect, exposing their complete ignorance of the underlying software math. I could not bear to watch the painful display any longer. 8 years of silent compliance and professional restraint evaporated in a single second. Stepping forward from the back wall into the center of the sunlit conference room, I spoke up, my voice calm, clear, and perfectly steady. I explained that the system did not rely on static historical averages or generic machine learning frameworks. Instead, it executed real-time Bayesian probability adjustments, integrated directly with live meteorological satellite feeds, using dynamic algorithmic recalculations to reroute vessels preemptively prior to storm entry. The entire boardroom fell instantly silent. 20 pairs of eyes turned simultaneously toward me. Hollis Thorne's face flushed a deep, violent shade of crimson, while Gavin Sears looked as though he might throw up on his expensive leather shoes. Hollis immediately attempted to regain control of the room, offering a forced, nervous laugh. He interjected quickly that I was merely Elliot Vance, one of their behind-the-scenes senior support coders who helped with minor back-end maintenance tasks. Something inside me locked into place. I looked directly at Valerie Takahashi and stated clearly that I was not a support coder. I declared that I was the sole architect of the entire Meridian platform, that I had authored every line of the core codebase over 6 months of isolated effort, and that the underlying algorithm was derived from my independent research paper, published 2 years prior to this engagement. I asserted that neither Gavin, Spencer, nor Hollis had contributed a single line of functional code or mathematical formula to the solution they were attempting to present. Valerie Takahashi set her fountain pen down. With a sharp, deliberate click, she looked at Hollis with cool disdain, then turned her full attention to me. She requested that I step up to the head of the conference table and walk their executive team through the full technical documentation from start to finish. For the next 45 minutes, I possessed that room completely. Without looking at a single slide or speaker note, I detailed every architectural layer, every database schema, every fallback security protocol, and every algorithmic optimization I had designed. I answered deep, complex technical questions from Meridian's Chief Technology Officer, Dominic Rhodes, with fluent, unshakable mastery. When Dominic questioned the latency of real-time API integrations during oceanic transit disconnects, I explained the localized caching protocols and automated synchronization queues I had built to ensure zero data loss. I demonstrated how edge computing nodes deployed on vessel hardware maintained predictive integrity even when satellite links suffered temporary blackouts. I also detailed how the multi-threaded event loop prevented thread blocking during peak data ingestion spikes. Hollis, Gavin, and Spencer stood along the perimeter of the boardroom in total, humiliated silence, completely incapable of contributing a single meaningful sentence to the conversation. When I finished my presentation, Valerie Takahashi nodded slowly, her expression deeply impressed. She thanked me for the masterclass in enterprise system architecture. Then she turned to her legal counsel and made a statement that sent a massive shockwave through the room. She stated that Meridian Logistics maintained strict corporate governance and risk management protocols under federal compliance guidelines. Under their procurement policies, the lead technical creator of any mission-critical enterprise software was required to sign off on the official technical specifications and performance guarantees. She looked squarely at Hollis Thorne and informed him that unless Elliot Vance personally signed the technical execution agreement, Meridian would not execute the $5.8 million contract. Following the adjournment of the meeting, Valerie Takahashi asked me to remain behind while the rest of the Helios team was dismissed. Hollis threw me a look of pure venom as he was ushered out the door by Meridian's security staff. Once the room cleared, Valerie handed me her direct business card. She remarked that she had managed enterprise technology implementations for 25 years and recognized corporate credit theft when she saw it. She told me that accountability, integrity, and authentic technical leadership were non-negotiable standards for Meridian. She instructed me that if Hollis Thorne or Helios management attempted to coerce or retaliate against me, I should call her direct line immediately. That evening, I did not celebrate prematurely. Instead, I met with a senior labor and intellectual property attorney recommended by my sister Laura. We spent 3 hours reviewing my original employment contract with Helios alongside my prior published white paper. My attorney pointed out a critical legal vulnerability for Helios. Because the underlying dynamic routing algorithm originated from my independent research white paper, published 2 years before the Meridian assignment, Helios did not possess exclusive, unencumbered ownership of the mathematical methodology. My attorney explained that if Helios attempted to commercialize my prior intellectual property without proper licensing or formal attribution, they would be in direct violation of federal statutory protections under Title 18, United States Code, Section 1836, the Defend Trade Secrets Act, as well as federal copyright statutes under Title 17, United States Code, Section 201. Furthermore, attempting to force me to sign technical guarantees under threat of termination constituted actionable constructive discharge and breach of implied covenant of good faith. I possessed total, absolute legal leverage over my firm. The next morning at 8 in the morning, I walked into the Helios headquarters wearing a tailored dark navy suit I had not worn in years. As expected, I was immediately summoned to executive management. I walked into the main glass conference room on the 5th floor to find Hollis Thorne sitting alongside Eleanor Cross, the Vice President of Human Resources. Hollis looked exhausted, his eyes bloodshot from a sleepless night, but his demeanor remained hostile and defensive. He launched into an angry tirade, accusing me of committing an unprecedented act of corporate insubordination, destroying team cohesion, and humiliating department leadership in front of a major enterprise client. Eleanor Cross chimed in with a cold, measured corporate tone, warning me that my aggressive behavior severely threatened my standing at Helios. She stated that while management acknowledged my technical contributions, no single employee was bigger than the firm. She attempted to play on my age, subtly hinting that at 49, finding a comparable senior software architect role in a competitive market would be exceptionally difficult. She added that Helios had a reputation for enforcing strict non-disparagement agreements and non-compete clauses against engineers who stepped out of line. She then pushed a single-page document across the table, explaining that they were willing to offer me a 5% one-time performance bonus upon contract closing, provided I signed the Meridian technical specifications immediately as a staff contributor under Hollis Thorne's executive approval. I did not touch their paper. Instead, I calmly pulled out a multi-page legal document prepared by my attorney the previous night and slid it across the table toward Eleanor and Hollis. I informed them that those were my non-negotiable terms for executing the technical sign-off required by Meridian Logistics. My terms required an immediate formal title promotion to Chief Technical Architect, absolute operational authority over the project implementation team, full written attribution in all client documentation, and an immediate 12% base salary increase to bring my compensation into parity with executive peers. Hollis slammed his hand on the mahogany table, shouting that my demands constituted corporate extortion and that he could have me terminated on the spot for gross misconduct. I looked him dead in the eye and responded with total calm. I informed him that he certainly possessed the administrative authority to fire me. However, if he terminated my employment, he would have to explain to Valerie Takahashi within 30 minutes why the chief architect of the $5.8 million system was no longer available to sign the mandatory technical specifications. Furthermore, I laid out the precise legal reality established by my attorney. I explained that if Helios attempted to utilize the core dynamic routing module without my authorized signature or proper IP licensing, my legal counsel would immediately file an emergency injunction in federal district court under Title 18, United States Code, Section 1836, for trade secret misappropriation, while asserting independent copyright claims under Title 17, United States Code, Section 201 regarding my pre-existing white paper. I added that such a public federal lawsuit would freeze the Meridian deal indefinitely, invalidate their existing non-compete threats, and expose Helios executive leadership to individual statutory liability for trade secret infringement. Eleanor Cross's face went completely pale. She turned to look at Hollis, who looked as if he had just swallowed glass. The corporate bluster and empty threats evaporated instantly from the room. They asked for 2 hours to consult with corporate legal counsel. At 4:47 in the afternoon, 13 minutes before my 5 o'clock deadline, Eleanor Cross called me back into the office. Helios formally accepted all of my terms without exception. I signed the official contract modifications, secured my title as Chief Technical Architect, took total control of the project, and executed the technical sign-off for Meridian. Over the next 3 months, I led the Meridian implementation with absolute precision. I deliberately restructured the engineering team, sidelining Gavin Sears and Spencer Drake to routine administrative reporting roles where they could cause no further technical damage. In their place, I selected 2 brilliant junior female developers, Chloe and Hannah, who had been routinely overlooked by Hollis for years. Together, we worked tirelessly, executing the deployment ahead of schedule while establishing a collaborative, highly supportive engineering environment where every developer received full credit for their work. We ran bi-weekly code reviews, established pair programming sessions, and ensured that every pull request clearly documented individual engineering contributions. 3 months into the successful deployment, Valerie Takahashi invited me for a private lunch at an upscale restaurant downtown, after expressing her immense satisfaction with SOS Software's performance, which was already reducing Meridian's transit delays beyond our initial projections. She placed an executive folder on the table. She explained that Meridian Logistics was launching an autonomous technology division to build next-generation freight software. She stated that her chief technology officer, Dominic Rhodes, wanted me to serve as the executive vice president of enterprise architecture. The offer was staggering. It included a base compensation more than double my salary at Helios, substantial corporate equity, a comprehensive executive benefit package, and full authority to hire an elite team of 30 engineering professionals. Valerie told me that a professional of my caliber should never have to fight for basic professional respect or defend his intellectual property from corporate parasites. She gave me time to consider the transition, assuring me that the position would remain open until I was ready. I completed the Meridian implementation at Helios with uncompromising professionalism, ensuring that Chloe and Hannah were fully trained and positioned to maintain the infrastructure. Once the final system, acceptance sign-off, was delivered to the client, I walked into Hollis Thorne's office, handed him my formal 2-week resignation notice, and walked out without waiting for a response. There was no farewell party, no exit speeches, and no parting gifts. I simply packed my personal belongings into a single box, walked past the empty glass conference rooms, and closed that 8-year chapter of my life forever. Upon joining Meridian Logistics as executive vice president, my first official executive action was hiring Chloe and Hannah away from Helios, offering them significant salary increases and clear career advancement tracks. Over the subsequent 18 months, the talent drain from Helios accelerated rapidly. As word spread across the software engineering community regarding the toxic culture under Hollis Thorne, 7 senior engineers resigned from Helios to join our growing division at Meridian or other top-tier software firms. Without competent engineering talent to maintain their legacy code, Helios suffered major contract losses, including losing the multi-million-dollar Archer Logistics account to a rival firm. 1 year later, industry news confirmed that Hollis Thorne had been quietly stripped of his executive title and demoted to an administrative advisory role due to chronic project failures. 3 years after leaving Helios, I was invited to deliver the keynote address at a national technology leadership conference in Chicago. Speaking before an audience of over 1,200 engineering executives, developers, and industry leaders, I presented on building ethically grounded, high-performing software organizations. I emphasized that true corporate leadership is not demonstrated by taking credit for the labor of others, but by creating an environment where talent is recognized, protected, and nurtured. As I looked out across the auditorium, I spotted a familiar face sitting in the back row. Hollis Thorne, looking noticeably older, worn, and out of place, attending the conference as a regular attendee. When our eyes met across the room, I felt no anger, no bitterness, and no desire for petty triumph. I simply offered a polite, distant nod before returning to my speech. After the keynote session concluded, a young female engineer named Zoe approached me near the stage, holding a notebook tightly against her chest. She confessed nervously that she was currently experiencing the exact same credit theft at her enterprise firm, watching her mail. Managers present her machine learning algorithms as their own, while excluding her from client meetings. I took time to speak with her, sharing the legal and strategic steps I had taken, reassuring her of her intrinsic professional worth, and connecting her directly with tech advocacy networks and talent recruiters. Looking back on that freezing Tuesday morning in the glass boardroom, I realized that true professional revenge was never about watching Hollis Thorne fail or seeing Helios suffer corporate decline. The ultimate victory was transforming my own trajectory, asserting my legal boundaries, and using my earned executive authority to ensure that the next generation of talented engineers would never have to suffer the quiet humiliation of having their life's work erased. Some people say success is the best revenge. I disagree. The best revenge is creating a workplace where what happened to you cannot easily happen to anyone else. Every engineer who spends decades in this industry eventually faces a defining choice. You can allow corporate cynicism to erode your passion and quiet your voice, or you can stand firmly on the value of your craft and demand the respect you have rightfully earned. When you know your worth, understand your legal rights, and refuse to play the victim, the entire balance of corporate power shifts in your favor. Never let anyone convince you that staying quiet is your only option. When I look back at my journey from an overlooked senior developer sitting alone in a dark cubicle at 3 in the morning to an executive, managing 34 brilliant minds, I am filled with profound gratitude for that moment of courage in the boardroom. It taught me that legal protections under federal trade, secret statutes, and copyright laws are not abstract legal concepts. They are powerful shields for creators who dare to defend their work. If you are standing where I once stood, remember that your knowledge is your greatest asset. Protect it, honor it, and never allow insecure managers to diminish your contribution. True technical leadership is ultimately measured by the enduring systems you construct and the people you empower along the way. When you replace toxic corporate politics with transparency, rigorous standards, and genuine recognition, you build organizations that outlast any petty manager. As I continue to lead our engineering teams at Meridian Logistics, I remain committed to opening doors for talented engineers who have been silenced or overlooked. That commitment is not just my personal career philosophy. It is the foundation of every triumph we achieve together.